Welcome to another episode of the Commudemy Podcast. This is episode 1 of season 3. And the Commudemy Podcast is a conversational podcast exploring the stories, insights, and strategies behind learning-centric communities. Our mission is to inspire listeners by highlighting individuals who are shaping the future of how people come together to learn, grow, and thrive. I am thrilled to sit down today with Adrian Duke, co-founder and CEO of IX Labs, a Vancouver-based design firm that is redefining gamified, immersive, and experiential learning. Positioned at the intersection of storytelling, spatial design, and cutting-edge technology, Adrian and his team partner with some of the world's leading brands to craft unforgettable learning that elevates user experiences and achieves key business outcomes. In this conversation, we'll explore what it means to architect learning that's felt, not just delivered, and unpack the roles that XR, gaming, and interaction design are playing as we push the innovation envelope. Adrian, it's awesome to have you on the show today. Let's start by unpacking a little bit about your background. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about getting to know you and having a few chats is you bring a lot of eclectic talents to your current role. So share with us and the audience a little bit about what got you interested in gamifying learning and the learning space to begin with.
Yeah, it was not it wasn't something that I knew I wanted to do, as a young adult or as a kid. But I went to BCIT, the British Columbia Institute of Technology, and there I met a friend through playing hockey who was taking robotics. And we connected and after school started a company making control and automation systems for water slides and amusement rides. And it was a really eye-opening experience, learning a lot about different technologies that I had no idea existed or were used so commonly in everyday things. And that's only expanded over time. And so getting into it from that side of it, we started putting in and designing water slides that were extreme. We built a water slide that was 100 feet tall and did a complete loop-de-loop safely, floors that would drop out and put you into the slide. So really exciting and interesting things. And one day I took my team to an escape room that had just opened in the city, the first that had come. And we were really excited about it. I remember it was you're locked in the cargo hold of a ship. You don't know how you got here and you don't know how to get out. So I was really excited. We got there and it was a really disappointing experience. Everything from the front host staff were wearing lab coats. We thought that was maybe part of it. We asked them about it and it had nothing to do with it, just a costume. And we get in the room. It's just a very simple room with IKEA furniture, a mirror on the wall, and some Sudoku puzzles. So, we went through the entire experience and I walked out of there, feeling disappointed, but also, sort of a light bulb went off and I thought we could use our control systems to do something more interactive, have things pop out of the wall when you did something right, have reactions inside of the room to your actions. And so we set out doing it. Built an escape room in Vancouver, opened that up and had great success and great feedback from that. We really took a focus on game design. So hired video game designers to help create all the levels and all of the experience. And then movie set designers to help build it to feel real. And when we launched, obviously we knew that people would come to do this for fun, but we realized really quickly that people were really looking for corporate um, training or activities to do, team building activities. And we got a lot of people coming through for that. And that's when we realized that what we had designed had really focused on elements that were critical for helping a team work together, solve problems together, learn about leadership. And that really kicked off my journey into the gamification of learning.
I think there's so much to unpack there, Adrian. A lot of entrepreneurs and folks that I've had a chance to speak with and learn from over the last 2 seasons, they've shared similar kind of the catalyst that got them into what they're doing today was born out of a need they discovered themselves, going through an experience and seeing something not work the way it should, or gauging that there's a lot of room for improvement, served as that initial inspiration to kind of design something that you would enjoy and that others in your team and your circle would enjoy. So I think there's a lot of parallels there, and I'm sure we'll come back to that idea of what sparked some of that entrepreneurial energy. One of the things I would love to learn a little bit more about is when I talk to leaders in the learning field, there's so much that's happening right now with emerging technology and the role that it plays in human dynamics. How do I, as an individual contributor, leverage technology in my work versus how do I use technology as a leader to make my team work even more efficiently and make them even more capable at what they do. What are some of the learnings that you've come up with or that you've been able to walk away with designing experiences for corporate teams?
But, one that comes to mind for me is, technology can be an impediment to learning, right? If you're more distracted by your phone, not engaged in something, or are looking for technology to sort of shortcut you, it can actually have a detrimental effect. But at the same time, it can be so powerful. And so, for what we've learned in using technology, is that technology isn't the reason we do it, it's a tool to help, and you need to find the right tool for that job. And so in corporate training experiences, as an example, there's the key is to create an experience that takes people out of their daily life, creates a suspension of disbelief. And in order to do that for adults, it's a lot harder than it is for kids, right? Kids can play, they can imagine, they've created a whole world just in their bedroom. Adults, we've been watching Netflix for way too long. We've got easy access to content, and we don't need to tap into that imagination the same way. And so when you put me in a room telling me that it's supposed to be a cargo hold of a ship and it doesn't feel believable, I don't lean into it. I don't get excited about it. I don't start to play because I can tell this is phony. And so we obviously know that we aren't going to be able to create these experiences that fully take you there, but you have to use technology in a way that helps bridge that gap to letting them use their imagination. So, as an example, we embed screens inside so that the windows that you're looking out look like you're looking out somewhere. We use projection mapping. We use all sorts of different tools to help you walk in and go, whoa, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be in this narrative. And it still takes a little bit of time. But once people get into it and they start with the challenges, it really helps them get over that. And suddenly you find that they're forgetting that they're doing a corporate training event and they're really just trying to complete it. And I think the piece that I touched on there, that's equally important. It's not technology based, but it's giving them a clear mission. You don't understand what you're supposed to be doing, and that mission isn't very clear. You might not know all the steps to complete that mission, but you need to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And so we always start all of our experiences with a clear overall objective that everybody is trying to achieve together. And there may be several ways to do it, some better than others, some more efficient than others. And it really then tests the team on who's going to step up and lead? How are you going to show up and dive in, lean into the activity and figure it out. And the technology just adds that ambiance to get you in the mood and to let you forget that, you're at a work event.
So how much of it would you say, Adrian, is the programmatic element of it, putting the expectation down in a way that everybody can understand it? And how much of it is the physical sensory inputs that you incorporate? I'm guessing there is no formula, no silver bullet, right? Every experience is different, every team is different. What you're looking to achieve, I think it really varies based off of the specific, circumstances. But I'd love to get your take on the substance versus the setting, right? What's more important in that
So to me, I
balance?
think, we always start with the substance. What are we trying to achieve? What do we want people to walk away knowing, feeling, understanding? And so when we start there, we find the right setting to make that the easiest for them to learn and to achieve. But for me, the substance there is a lot of times it is overdone. When there's too much information, too many messages trying to be taught, it can be challenging for people to walk away with all of them. And so we really try to boil it down to what is the most important thing for somebody to understand when they walk out of here. And then there can be other elements, but we're not trying to get them to, learn an entire manual, in an experience because ultimately they're not going to be able to retain all of that. We want them to feel something. So when somebody walks out of one of our experiences, we want them to, without prompting, be able to be talking about it. I noticed that if we would have done this, then we would have achieved a better result. Or because we did this, that's why we won. That's why we were successful. And so those things should be really obvious if we've done our job well and focused on what that substance we want them to learn, prioritize it, and then weave the setting in to make that learning easy to achieve.
think if I were to, I'm a huge fan of alliteration, and my brain tends to think about words if they're grouped a certain way. So I think I would maybe add simplicity, and the last one would probably be stickiness, right? So if you have a substance that at its core is simple to understand, is simple for people to rally around, okay, this experience that we're doing as a team is going to help us become better communicators. Maybe that's too broad. I'm just giving an example here, but this is going to help me have a better conversation with my colleagues, right? Simple. We know the substance. It's going to involve team building of some kind. We have a setting, right? And then we also make it sticky. So that's where the many different components you design come in to make it a memorable experience, have those sensory inputs, tactile inputs, sounds, visuals, etc. I want to dovetail into that a little bit, Adrian. When I think of XR, experiential reality, I haven't really scratched the surface of what it means. I've gone to a couple of expos and seen the headsets and tried to experience that myself. But help our audience understand a little bit how the nomenclature around some of these technologies. There's XR, there's AR, there's VR. How do they come together in the work that you do?
Yeah, no, great question. For me, they all have their utility at certain points. So augmented reality is, kind of the Pokemon Go is the best, simplest example. It's putting a layer over top of the real world. And so this is a useful tool in getting people to learn things in a physical space that you maybe don't have the budget to transform the entire space. You can use that as an interesting tool there. It's not as immersive because you're holding a device, you're walking through the physical world. But for me, it starts to dwindle in its utility if it's overused. If the entire experience is based around, an augmented reality layer. Virtual reality, in contrast to that, really transports you to the place, that the virtual world, whether that's a 360 video, whether that's, a game or a world that's been created in VR. When you put that headset on, you've got blinders. You're not seeing the rest of the room that you're in. You know that you have a headset on, but if done well, you'll forget about it for the 10 minutes that you're in there. And so it's a really powerful tool. And one of the things that we pushed for that, bridging it towards XR, was merging that with the physical world. We created an experience where everything that you could see in the virtual world, also you could reach out and touch and feel. And so rather than using gestures to control, what's happening in your experience, you actually had to use physical controls, spinning valves, hitting buttons, and they were all mapped to the physical world. And I'll take that one step further, is that you could actually see your partners or your other players in the experience, which I think is one of the major challenges with VR, is that it can be quite isolating. So you might be doing an experience and there might be 10 other people doing same experience with you, but you're not sharing it in the same way. And so for me, that's where XR is our primary focus. We want to bridge the physical and the digital worlds. And we want to make that experience, anything that you do tactilely is going to have a physical and a digital reaction to you. And that just creates that dopamine hit I achieved something and I saw a result for putting in the effort to solve this or to figure this out. And it creates, for me, the most exciting part, really amazing reactions as a group. We see groups jumping and cheering, high-fiving, hugging, celebrating together, that achievement. Or likewise, just falling short and wanting to keep going to try to get it because they know they were right there and now they see what they did wrong. And so it creates that shared experience, which at the core of it is really what I love about this work, creating memorable shared experiences.
Yeah, and I think a lot of learning leaders across the board, they're experimenting with ways to build that engagement, to build that sense of trust, suspending their idea of disbelief. I love that expression. It has a finite duration, right? These experiences before we return to the real world, temporarily creating that space in which great memories and great experiences can take place. It takes me back to the innocence of childhood. Like when we were kids, we could have that type of impromptu discovery in a sandbox, in our bedrooms, wherever we were as kids. Somewhere along the way, we lose that. Maybe it's because of the way that schooling programs us or the world and the real world gets to us. We lose that along the way. What are some of the key topics, Adrian, that you're seeing in the industry that companies are really focusing on leveraging this XR technology and the work that you're doing? What are some of those in-demand topics?
Yeah, I think the most in demand is really learning about their messaging. So it's brand activations. It's not the most direct corporate learning as we also do for training, but the experiences there follow the same mechanic, right? If you're going to be at a trade show or a large event, having a conference, having a booth and having people come up and you're trying to pull them in to have a conversation and tell them all about the great things that you do, it's a lot harder because people have their wall up, they're guarded. And so when we create experiences that really truly portray the messaging of the brand, but they do it in a fun way. And I think you mentioned that, fun is the key to this because people want to try something new. They want to try something different. And they're okay with learning a message, knowing that this is a corporate experience, that they're going to be sold a little bit, through this experience. And so it's got to be fun for them. If it's really boring and really dry, then you've wasted my time. I didn't get anything in exchange for listening to your messaging. And so I think that by far is the most in demand. It's museums, it's the same thing, right? We're taking static, dry content, textbooks historically, right? And now they've for a long time been plaques on the wall, looking at artifacts, don't touch, just look and read and walk through. Well, kids these days are way, way, way more advanced, in that, and they're expecting more. They want to interact and they want to engage with that. And so it's the same premise there. But as far as the learning space goes, I think we mostly see, a preference for improving communication, understanding that the team needs to work together to achieve something, especially in this digital age where we all might be like you and I are here today, not in the same room. But in order for us to achieve success as an organization, we need to be on the same page. We need to be supporting each other. I need to understand that my job is important, but if Farhan's job isn't there, I can't do my job. So if your role isn't being done, I can't succeed. And so that kind of experience that forces groups to attempt to win as individuals, only to realize that the only way through to succeed is through working together. And the more effective they are at working together, the more they can understand the different leadership styles, the different personality types. Just because somebody's quiet doesn't mean they don't have the answer. The loudest person in the room doesn't always have the answer. And so a lot of these kind of human dynamics are at the core of what corporate training is all about. And when you boil them all down, there might be really critical, elements of specific to a business. But at the end of the day, communication and understanding people drives a long ways towards people overcoming those themselves. And then of course there's always more specific elements, the management training, leadership training that are weaved into these elements. But at the foundation, the learning is about communication.
There's honestly no surprise there. It's one of the things that as I continue to delve into the many different realms within the learning space, especially within professional development and the role of human intelligence that is evolving exponentially with the rapid adoption of artificial intelligence, I don't think the need is ever going to go away in terms of really rising to the challenge, continuing to use technology to augment and in many ways enhance some of these interactions that otherwise feel kind of flat and two dimensional. But now we're taking it into the 3D realm and into the experiential realm. When you think about the work that you do, Adrian, and the work that you and your team have been able to spearhead for the past many years, engagement is the metric. I want to talk a little bit about metrics later. It's one of the metrics that a lot of learning is measured by, right? How engaged are the participants? How engaged are the learners? This is a two-part question. I'd love to understand what engagement means to you in the work that you do. And then part two is, let's say my team comes in and we go through one of these awesome experiences, right? What types of data do you collect, if any? I'd love to hear both about engagement and about
Yeah,
metrics in
it's
general.
it's something that at the beginning was very little. We had a desire to collect it, but it took us a while to figure out what was actually valuable and how to collect it and how to make it tangible and usable. And so the more that we've done corporate training, the more that I can you take a given plan, whether it's a management training, leadership, program, and we're adding a layer of experiential to it. And so from our side is it's data throughout the experience on how they did, what pieces. So, for instance, there might be 4 or 5 challenges in an experience. And during that experience, they have to complete those different elements. And each of them may be paired towards a different learning objective or a different outcome. And so we can look at the different groups and we can actually break it down with them after the fact, after each group goes through to say, okay, you guys did so good on these ones, but this one here is where you guys struggled, right? It took you 2 times longer than average to complete this task. And from there, we have learning outcomes and lessons that we can learn from that. But the beauty of experiential is we usually don't even have to tell them what it was that they did wrong. They are able to self-identify it because they experienced it, they did it, and they know that they messed up there. And so I think for us, that data is useful in prompting the discussion and getting them to self-discuss and self-admit what went wrong or what went right in doing that. But there's a lot of other metrics that we collect a lot. Like I'll give you an example. We just did a recycling project. And in that recycling project, it's at the Science World. And we're collecting constant data on which stations are getting used, which ones are getting used more, how long they're being used for, success and fail rates, et cetera. And they're all learning about recycling, how to properly recycle. And so in that experience, that data is really useful, not only to us, but to the Science Work Center, as well as to the client. And they can see in real time, how their message is being interacted with in the general public and in their age demographic. And this is only advancing. We've got sensors that we can track, people coming in to that experience and whether they walk up and then don't engage, or whether they engage and they stay for 2 minutes, or they stay and do everything and they're there for 10 minutes. So, the data that we're being able to track and collect, not on a personal level, but on a sort of an oversight level of how is this message being delivered, how is it being received, and are people actually engaging with it and learning from it.
And what have you found, if I can ask this, Adrian? I'm asking you to distill a lot of your learnings over the course of this short conversation, but what are some of these, maybe something that you were really surprised by on one of your recent projects, right? Or something that your team has been able to learn that maybe you didn't expect when you set out working on a project? I'd love to learn some of those aha moments.
I think, a recent one for me, it's been working with Indigenous communities and, sharing, Indigenous knowledge. And I think it's been interesting because it's something that not everybody wants to learn about or has an appetite or knows they want to learn about. And so, we recently built a large 360 LED wall, 8 foot tall, projection mapping on the floor, and really interactive. And I think for me, the the storytelling component, of that and interviewing people as they come out and finding what they took from it and what they learned from it was really interesting to me because we set out with a goal of what we wanted them to learn, but we find that people pick up on a lot of other things as well that were there but they weren't the core message. And so everybody's experience is different, and I think that's the beautiful thing about experiential learning and interactive technology is that you kind of get what you put into it, and you have your own experience, although it's a curated experience. What you're bringing into it, your experience previously, what you knew or didn't know, impacts how it might hit you emotionally. And so I think for me, the data is always interesting because it shows, success or engagement numbers, or hey, we did something that people wanted to do and they're understanding the message. But when people are connecting emotionally, through sort of a focus group sort of approach at the end of these experiences, that's what really resonates for me. And that's what I really want to see more of. It is something that people walk away feeling something, not just having learned something, knowing something, but also feeling a certain way about it. And that's the power that storytelling has and why these experiences can be so powerful.
Yeah, and I think specifically thinking about the First Nations communities in Canada, it's one of the areas. I've been to British Columbia actually, and I worked with a firm that was actually based in Vancouver for a bit last year. I loved how intentional all of these companies that I've worked for and folks that I've interacted with have been when it comes to acknowledging the history and the traditions of, folks who were marginalized, right? And now we have inherited that that legacy for better or worse, and we have to really come to terms with the past to be able to chart a better course for the future, right? So it's great to hear that you're active in that space as well, because I know that that resonates a lot with folks not only in British Columbia but also across North America. One of the things that, as we kind of wind down the conversation, Adrian, I love to ask all my guests, what are they most excited about in their field or in their line of work, let's say over the next 5 to 10 years, mid to long term. I mean, XR and all these awesome technologies are still not mainstream, maybe to the point where, I still play my Xbox on a controller, right? I'm not, maybe this Black Friday will be different and the headsets are going to be flying off the walls, right? But, or flying off the shelves, I should say. But I feel that some of this technology is still a bit ways away from mass adoption. But I think that's going to change, right? What are your predictions for the next 5 to 10 years, not only in your field, but about learning in general?
Yeah, really great question. On the technology side, I think there's going to be things that we haven't even, got to experience yet, or the price point is coming down on a lot of things, and I think that's really, really good for these type of learning challenges. Even obviously AI is the big, talking point at this point, and it's scary for a lot of people in this space, in the creative space. But I think it also opens up a lot of possibilities. We recently did an on-site AI product, so it doesn't connect to, the internet anywhere. It's just localized for the activation. And it was extremely popular. The numbers that we're seeing out of the data we're collecting there are way higher than we thought. And really all it is the kids get to create their own champion. They're generating something that's a representation of themselves and what that looks like for them to be a champion, whether that's in sports or music or any field or vocation. And so I think even those tools like AI create experiences that previously weren't available to us. But so I think for me, the future, the next 5 years of learning are really going to be focused around the new generation, how they learn, what's different about how they learn, what are the impacts of things like the COVID shutdown and the isolation and the change in lots of, video calls and less in person. I think there's going to be a lot that needs to be adapted to these demographics. And I think that creates opportunity because, the physical and digital world for me are still paramount. But how do we get these people out and into those environments when they're spread out across the world? So, how do we bring the physical to them through the digital world and still create something compelling and valuable and make sure that at the end of the day, they're not left behind in this way of learning because they learn differently from maybe you or I or people in an older generation. Face to face was the way that we did everything. And it's less and less now. And so the adaptation of technology with those demographic changes, I think creates a really interesting challenge and an exciting opportunity.
We're going to have to unlearn a lot of these embedded notions around learning and pedagogy and how people work together in order to herald in this paradigm shift in terms of how people, nations, and teams are going to thrive. I'm already noticing it in a lot of the work that I'm doing, where we have to question the assumptions of yesterday, right? And I think you and your team specifically are, through the work that you're doing, which is rooted in experience, in an emotional connection, are spearheading that in many ways, because nothing beats the joy and the sense of wonder and delight that you get when you're learning and you don't even realize you're learning. Like, that's, to me, that's like the nirvana. That's like the golden ticket, right? I strive to, in the work that I do, create learning experiences that are so immersive and fun that it doesn't even feel like learning. That's when you've done your job, right? And then another last point of reflection here, Adrian, is if there's one word, or maybe some of my guests have used more than one word because it's tough to choose just a single word, but if there's a single phrase or word that you would hone in on as encapsulating what you want your listeners on this episode to walk away with, what would that be?
I think for me, the number one thing that all of this boils down to interactivity. Because if you can't have somebody participate in the learning, then they're not really engaged. I spend so much time watching videos and learning. You can be a sponge and you can learn a lot from hearing and from watching, but actually participating is where the real learning comes from. And so interactivity in lots of learning modules has been really robust and developed. But I think we got to continue to push that, because just like anything, what was interactive 5 years ago is boring for kids now, or for young adults now, or even for myself now. And so pushing that boundary of what does it mean to be interactive? What does it mean to immerse somebody in a learning? And like you said, to make them forget that they're learning, that's where the real magic happens. And I think it's an opportunity to push into subject matters that people don't want to learn about. And that's really what drives me. Things around mental health or Indigenous issues or personal finance. These are subjects that people don't want to spend their time learning about, but they're so important. And how do we use interactivity to draw them in to learn about something that is very important that they might not have had an interest in? And if we can create that spark, then there is lots of other learning opportunities for them to discover on their own and enhance their knowledge. So I find it's a stepping stone, a spark that we want to create. And that's what excites me the most.
Great call to action, Adrian. Where can folks find out more about you and IX Labs? What are the best resources for them to look
Yeah,
up?
our website's ixlabs.ca. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. We're also on Instagram, IX Labs. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out and see what kind of learning we can co-create.
That's amazing. I'm going to make sure all of these links are in the show notes for our audience. And this was a genuine pleasure, Adrian. Thank you so much for being a guest. Again, kicking off season 3. Lots more to learn and share. And I'm sure this isn't going to be the last time we're going to chat. So thank you
Thank you,
so
Brian.
much.
It was a pleasure.